Hey heroes, welcome to another fantastic episode of History of the Marvel Universe. The topic of this video was voted on by Patreon supporters. If you would like to contribute and vote in monthly polls, then you can sign up for an amount of your choosing over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelade. The link is in the description below, along with other places you can find me. This week we are looking at the Negative Zone, an alien universe with physical laws that differ greatly from those of positive realities. The Negative Zone is primarily composed of antimatter, although there are anomalous gravity wells consisting of positive matter that draw in non-photonic mass. The science behind these is not well understood, but each of these anomalies is surrounded by a debris field referred to as an annihilation area, in which matter and antimatter continually collide and explode. Countless eons ago, the first recorded species to reside in this universe was a leonine race of humanoids called the Tyannans. They lived on planet Tyanna, a world on the outer rim of the Negative Zone. A proud and scientifically advanced people, the Tyannans began charting other planets capable of supporting living organisms. In what some might call an act of arrogance, they decided to begin seeding their barren universe with life. To this end, they built enormous factories producing golden canisters filled with living spores. One of the earliest worlds they seeded was the planet Balur, where a race of savage gray-skinned warriors eventually emerged. Other places where life evolved included Utah, where a peaceful, technologically advanced race lived. That planet later shared its name with a massive city that covered half its surface, leaving the rest to nature. However, when this computerized city was granted rudimentary sentience, it perceived the people within the same way a human body would perceive a germ and drove them out. Many of the other inhabited worlds in the Negative Zone were also presumably seeded by the Tyannans. But as they continued their mission, an uncalculated accident occurred when one of their seed ships inadvertently struck a meteor near the core of the Negative Zone. This caused the ship to crash land on the dark, volcanic planet Arthros, leaving its crew stranded. With their food processors destroyed and no hope of survival, the ship's captain solemnly completed his mission, releasing a canister of life spores. He left a record of his mission and his people, while starvation slowly claimed the lives of his crew and ultimately the captain himself. Generations passed and the spores survived, giving rise to savage, monstrous creatures befitting the sweltering volcanic world. Most were barely sentient, if at all, but roughly 1,000 Earth years ago, one being emerged with the capacity to think. This strange insectoid creature soon gained self-awareness, and with it, intelligence far beyond that of the other denizens of Arthros. However, it was also smaller and weaker, forcing it to flee from the monsters, swearing, in some way it didn't fully understand, that it would someday destroy them. And while searching for a place to hide, the insectoid creature came upon the wreckage of the Tyannan ship. It entered cautiously and was greeted by the stench of death, along with a number of decayed mammalian corpses. But it also found the recording helmet containing the history and technology of the Tyannan people. It wasn't until the creature placed the helmet on its own head that it, or rather, that he, began to understand. His mind opened and evolved, allowing him to comprehend the technology at his disposal, and realize that he could use it to become more powerful than anything else on Arthros. Using the left-behind life canisters and the ship's star drive, he created an energy-manipulating weapon called the Cosmic Control Rod. He also discovered the ship's gene transmuter and quickly mastered its functions. Using this machine, he was able to transform unevolved beings into loyal servants, the Scavengers. More importantly, he was able to make himself larger and stronger, eventually becoming known as Annihilus, the living death that walks. With advanced technology at his command, Annihilus became obsessed with one thing above all else: his own survival. To this end, he began destroying any creature he perceived as a threat, while subjugating others to increase his power and influence. This was not limited to his home planet, mind you, as he also began spreading to other worlds in the negative zone. One example of a race enslaved by Annihilus was the Borers, mindless spacefaring lizards capable of chewing through solid rock and even most metals. Furthermore, the Cosmic Control Rod served not only as a powerful weapon, but also prolonged his life indefinitely as long as he held it. And yet, across the centuries, he never came across the civilization of the Tyannans. This is because their people were genetically incapable of accepting failure or limitations, and elected to destroy themselves. In the wake of the crash that resulted in the birth of Annihilus, the vast majority of the Tyannan race flew into one of the Negative Zone's annihilation areas with their remaining seed ships. However, when they discovered that their technology could allow them to survive by shifting between positive and negative matter, their curiosity outweighed their desire for self-destruction, and the Tyannans secretly continued to live at the heart of the vortex. Now, even though matter and antimatter cannot typically touch without mutual annihilation, it is possible for beings to travel from the negative zone to positive universes by passing through a reality known as subspace. Due to the disorienting effect of subspace's four-dimensional nature on three-dimensional beings, it has also been referred to as the distortion area. When mass passes through this layer of reality, its charge will shift to align with the universe to which it exits, allowing denizens of the negative zone to travel to positive space and vice versa. A type of dimensional gateway capable of reaching the negative zone through the distortion area is often referred to as a radical cube. One such device was built on Earth by Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four, who was studying subspace for the purpose of faster-than-light travel, leading to his discovery of the negative zone. Meanwhile, the planet Balur, which we mentioned earlier, was ruled by a warrior known as Blastaar, the living bomb burst, and his queen Niglar. His tyrannical reign eventually came to an end when his own father, Grandar, led a rebellion against him. Too strong to be executed by traditional means, Blastaar was sedated, sealed in an adhesion suit, and stuck to a piece of debris field that was heading towards an exploding atmosphere. While all that was happening, the villainous Sandman infiltrated the Fantastic Four's headquarters atop the Baxter Building and battled Reed Richards. As a result of that battle, Reed was thrown into the Negative Zone portal, landing in that same debris field. He was rescued with the aid of the inhuman Triton, but this inadvertently awakened Blastaar. With his ability to generate explosions of kinetic force, Blastaar freed himself and followed Richards and Triton through the portal back to Earth. He joined forces with Sandman and battled the Fantastic Four, but was ultimately defeated and returned to the Negative Zone. The Baxter Building's Negative Zone portal was later used during a battle between the FF and an android built by the villainous Mad Thinker. After being banished into the anti-space by the Fantastic Four, this android was discovered by Annihilus. He then used his own technology to reprogram the machine, transforming it into one of his scavengers. Reed Richards later traveled to the Negative Zone with his teammates Ben Grimm and Johnny Storm to collect antimatter particles. Reed's wife, Susan, was pregnant, but the cosmic radiation that gave them their powers resulted in complications, and the negative particles were required for treatment. It was during this expedition that members of the Fantastic Four first encountered Annihilus and his scavengers. The heroes were captured, but Richards succeeded in escaping with the Cosmic Control Rod. He freed his teammates and extracted the much-needed particles from that device. Richards then surrendered the rod to Annihilus in exchange for the equipment needed to return to Earth. The resulting treatment for Susan was successful, and Franklin Benjamin Richards was born. The negative zone was also independently discovered by a being from the Microverse known as Psycho-Man. At the same time, Annihilus gained access to the Microverse and began sending his insectivorids to claim even more worlds. We've talked in depth about the Microverse on the channel before, but it's basically another layer of reality that has been perceived as microscopic, although this is something of a misconception. Psycho-Man attempted to seize control of Annihilus's dimensional interface, but this only caused his forces to turn their attention on his planetary system, Sub-Atomica. In his efforts to repel the invaders, Psycho-Man abducted two heroes from the Earth dimension, Spider-Man and the Silver Surfer, using them to fuel his emotion-powered weapons. However, the two heroes ultimately escaped, leaving Psycho-Man and Annihilus to battle one another. The details of the ensuing conflict are undocumented, but it seems that Annihilus and his forces were ultimately repelled back to the negative zone. Aside from a radical cube, another method of entering and exiting the negative zone involves a set of alien artifacts, the Nega-Bands, although this is less straightforward than a dimensional gateway. When the Kree hero Captain Mar-Vell was trapped in the negative zone, a human named Rick Jones was able to trade places with him by donning a pair of Nega-Bands and striking them together. They could swap back and forth with this method, but one of them remained trapped at any given time. At one point during this period, Dr. Doom stole Annihilus's cosmic control rod as part of a larger scheme to claim ultimate power. However, Annihilus was able to take Rick hostage, forcing the Fantastic Four to return his device once they defeated Doom. Mar-Vell later used the Fantastic Four's negative zone portal to retrieve Rick, allowing both of them to escape. Annihilus attempted to use this as an opportunity to invade Earth, but was forced back by the Avengers. Rick would later find himself trapped in the negative zone once again and had further encounters with Annihilus. Another person to make use of that portal was a research scientist by the name of Janus, a former colleague of Reed Richards who attended the same college as he and Doom. Janus sought to harness antimatter energy as an alternate power source. He viewed Richards and Doom as representative of a person's light and dark nature, and eventually his experiments split his own dark side into a separate being. Dubbed the Nega-Man, this entity clashed with the Fantastic Four, but was ultimately shot and killed by Janus himself. However, Janus continued his experiments in secret, charging himself with negative power. He then convinced Richards to show him around his lab, only to betray him and access the negative zone portal. Once through, he encountered Annihilus and confidently challenged him. Suffice it to say, that did not go well, and within moments, Janus was begging for his life and offering to betray humanity to Annihilus. He was also pursued by the Fantastic Four and continued to plot against Annihilus, but Janus was seemingly lost in one of the negative zone's exploding debris fields. In any event, this would not be the last time that Annihilus would attempt to invade the Earth. However, he soon realized that since Reed Richards had tampered with it, his cosmic control rod no longer endowed him with eternal life. By studying the family, he learned that Reed and Sue's young son, Franklin, had tremendous potential, and that his babysitter was a witch named Agatha Harkness. By expending a considerable amount of power, he was able to pull Agatha into the negative zone and then use her to abduct Franklin. Annihilus used his gene transmuter to unlock Franklin's latent power, absorbing the unleashed energy to restore his own strength and the full power of the cosmic control rod. The FF and their allies succeeded in rescuing Franklin, but Reed was forced to render his own son temporarily comatose to save the world from his out-of-control powers. In the wake of that battle, the Scavenger, who Annihilus made from the Mad Thinker's android, claimed the cosmic control rod for itself. This caused it to gain sentience as it grew into a powerful new form, the Monster Android. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Reed Richards battled an alternate version of himself known as the Brute. I'll note that the Brute is not from a parallel universe, but rather a duplicate of Earth that was created by the High Evolutionary. While this counter-Earth's population was primarily made up of counterparts of people from the regular Earth, none of them initially possessed superhuman powers or costumed identities. Of course, different circumstances, cosmic rays, and concussion resulted in that Reed Richards becoming the villainous Brute. After being accidentally brought to the original Earth, the Brute attempted to take his counterpart's place by banishing him into the negative zone. The real Reed was found by Annihilus, who proposed an alliance for the sake of both of their universes. You see, as its original creator, the Mad Thinker was able to seize control of the monster android and threatened to conquer both the Earth dimension and the negative zone. Reed and Annihilus were soon aided by Ben Grimm and Johnny Storm, who the Brute had tricked into the negative zone. Although the monster android left them stranded when the Mad Thinker took this opportunity to summon it to Earth through the same portal. Fortunately, some of the FF's allies arrived on the scene to hold off the menacing machine. Meanwhile, Reed promised to restore the cosmic control rod to Annihilus in exchange for the technology to get home. Sure enough, the FF and their allies were ultimately able to depower the monster android by removing his rod. Furthermore, Reed's act of heroism helped his counter-Earth counterpart realize the error of his ways, and so he volunteered to return the cosmic control rod to Annihilus, sealing the end zone portal behind himself. Meanwhile, around the same time, Captain Mar-Vell and the Avengers battled a power-copying android called the Super Adaptoid. During that encounter, Mar-Vell defeated the Adaptoid by tricking it into duplicating the powers of his Nega-Bands, and then forcing it to strike them together. This caused it to trade places with Rick Jones, freeing him from the negative zone for a second time. Apparently not having learned his lesson, Annihilus then found the Super Adaptoid and reprogrammed it to obey him. After that, Annihilus finally encountered Blastaar, who he'd known about but never met. Since his initial battle with the Fantastic Four, Blastaar had made multiple attempts to conquer Earth but was continually sent back to his native universe. Since Annihilus was regarded as the Lord of the Negative Zone, Blastaar offered to serve him in exchange for his aid in retaking planet Balur. Annihilus agreed, but having long since considered the Balurians a threat, was already plotting to betray his new ally. In apparent celebration of their alliance, Annihilus brought Blastaar to a fighting pit where entities were slain by the tentacled monster Saskra. However, among the would-be victims were Balurians who were still loyal to Blastaar, including his mate Niglar. Blastaar demonstrated his might by leaping into the arena and saving Niglar by throwing Saskra into space. However, Annihilus then demonstrated his ruthlessness by killing the other Balurians himself. Still in love with Blastaar, but distrustful of Annihilus, Niglar attempted to send a warning back to planet Balur. This transmission was picked up by the Baxter Building's computers while Ben Grimm was playing poker with members of the mighty Avengers. Realizing that an alliance between Annihilus and Blastaar would be nothing but trouble for their own universe, the heroes decided to intervene. In the ensuing conflict, Annihilus sent the reprogrammed Super Adaptoid to fight the heroes. Aided by Annihilus's forces, Blastaar led the attack on Balur to retake his homeworld. Annihilus was plotting to destroy the Balurians and slew Niglar after seeing her aid the Avengers. Blastaar witnessed this murder, but begrudgingly continued to work with Annihilus to achieve his goals. What Annihilus didn't know was that those slaughtered in the initial attacks on Balur were a weakened force primarily composed of political prisoners. When Annihilus's forces then penetrated to the planet, they were ambushed by the true might of the Balurian military. Knowing this would happen, Blastaar seized the cosmic control rod in the confusion and reclaimed his throne, declaring himself the new Lord of the Negative Zone. Grimm and the Avengers succeeded in subduing the super-adaptoid, but returned home with the realization that their intervention hadn't improved the situation. With his immortality lost once again, Annihilus began to degrade, forcing him to don an exoskeletal suit to mimic his true form. Sometime later, the Fantastic Four launched an exploratory mission into the Negative Zone. Annihilus took this opportunity to slip through the portal to Earth unnoticed. During their expedition, the FF encountered the descendants of the people who had been driven from the living city Utah and resided outside of it. Having grown barbarous and superstitious, the people of Utah sought to reclaim the city and regularly sacrificed young women to it. Witnessing this, Ben Grimm and Johnny Storm interrupted one such ritual and attacked the city's living brain. Reed realized that Utah was acting based only on self-preservation instincts, but was too late to save it. Like scavengers drawn to decaying flesh, the people of Utah swarmed the city's corpse and claimed it as their own once again. On this trip, the FF also encountered the Castorans, whose homeworld had been destroyed by a supernova, as well as the feudalistic planet Mantracora and their humanoid inhabitants. Meanwhile, on Earth, with his own life in danger of ending, Annihilus plotted to merge the two universes, destroying both of them in the ensuing matter-antimatter explosion. The FF learned of this scheme in time to stop it, damaging Annihilus's life support suit and casting him back into the Negative Zone in the process. He was nearly destroyed, but was captured and imprisoned by Blastaar. Sometime later, Blastaar, still in possession of the Cosmic Control Rod, lured the Fantastic Four into a trap in an effort to defeat them once and for all. The heroes managed to seize the rod in the ensuing battle, but Blastaar tricked Johnny Storm into trying to destroy it by throwing it into what he claimed to be an atomic disintegrator. However, it seems that this was actually the prison containing Annihilus, who then regained his full strength. As one might expect though, Blastaar's plan to use Annihilus to destroy the Fantastic Four quickly backfired. With the full might of the Cosmic Control Rod back at his disposal, Annihilus struck at the Bellurians and quickly reclaimed his position as the true Lord of the Negative Zone. That's pretty much all we've got time for this week, but this is yet another topic that we could come back to another day if you guys are interested. There were a lot of stories involving the Negative Zone I wanted to touch on in this video besides just Annihilus's origin, so I hope you enjoyed the ones I chose. But if you do want to hear more about the Negative Zone and Annihilus, or any other topics I've talked about on the channel, then definitely let me know in the comments. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me, including my Patreon page where, for only $1 a month, you can get your name in these special thanks here, and vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel. So until next time, true believers, Excelsior!